Good afternoon all, Dave, GKQ. I used to just do amateur TV, now I do the Portsdown. How many of you are Portsdown builders before we start? A good proportion, that's great to see. What I want to cover, a quick look at who the team is, the improvement process, how we decide what goes into the next release, what I've done recently, my to-do list, because I've got a list of things I want the Portsdown to do. I want to hear your to-do lists, and we'll have a quick chat about receiving the Portsdown from Minituner as well. The project started for me in earnest about 10 months ago, and it's amazing how far we've come in that time. I translated a French article about the software for CAT17 less than a year ago. Soon after translating the article, I tried it out with the DigiLite modulator. I had DigiLite already built, and it was a fairly simple matter to plumb a Raspberry Pi into DigiLite, and I was really impressed. Noel and I had some discussions with a few other people, and we defined the project scope and the aims, which really was to draw people back into amateur TV. The people have been running AM in the 70s, 80s and 90s and found it really easy. Similar sort of approach, getting back in. We worked a bit on the software. We started developing some hardware and had a good team working on that. Got the software to the stage where it was really reliable, and then started putting it out there. And now we're into this cycle of it works, but what more would we like it to do, what's missing, and so on. We're up to 171 users that I know their call signs. There are more out there. I found out this week that there's one French guy who's been buying SD cards. I've been giving them to my friends who've been building them because they don't speak English, but they wanted the cards. So there are quite a few extras out there. Users all over the world, right from New Zealand through Japan to the west coast of the States. Really impressive. The shop and the Royal Mail have been doing well out of them. UK-wise, plenty in the south of England, and as Noel mentioned, one up in Aberdeen. So a good layout there. I wanted to talk about the team because it's not just me. Evereast wrote the original software. The core of it, still written by Evereast, and I email him regularly about how we can move it forward. John in the States did all our hardware designs. All the boards, the certain nice surface mount boards that you've built have been done by John. Really good effort. Most of them have worked first time, you know, from drawing board to something that we build and works first time. Been really impressed with that. Colin has done the UK building side and the initial testing. John, G7JTT, has done production testing. Has been really good on response times for, you know, I'll generate something in the software. John will test it and say, yeah, it works, but, and thinks of the things I don't, which is really good. Charles, G4GUO, has supported not only in getting DATV Express to work with it, but also in other ways. Chris, on the DATV Express side and streaming. Phil, my son, has done a fair bit on helping me with understand Linux, because I went from a bit of Unix about 20 years ago, then nothing, and then back into this about a year ago. And Noel's been great for bouncing ideas, pushing the program along, and going to the post office very regularly with stuff. So the wider team, the French have been there writing software. There's the receiver software is by F4DAV, and there are other guys there who've been involved in helping Evereast. So it's a big team, it's not just me. the improvement process. How do I decide what goes in the software? Well, I get a suggestion or an idea. I try and write it down on my notes on my iPad. Otherwise I forget it. It gets in there and sometimes it gets to the top of the pile. I prototype it, and if I can get into my shack, it gets tested in the shack. That was the bench the other day. Clearly the bench isn't big enough. This is 24 gigs coming along, but so that gets pushed to one side, put the ports down there. Let's try the Portsdown stuff. I get these new features, trying to make them work, and I put together a development release, and there's a team of John, G7GATT, generally Noel, quite often Chris, and anybody else who's contributed to that build, or the guy who asked for the feature. I'll say, okay, I've put this development release out there now, and there's a special way of downloading the development release. They do an update, get the development release, take a look at it and say, yeah, that works, but I tried this and it didn't. So we do generally once round iteration to get a release that's ready to go out the door. I fix the bugs, push it to the production server, and then I try and document it, the boring bit. So I write a forum post about the new release. If it's got major functionality, I write a wiki page about it as well. The place to keep watching for new releases though is the forum, the software thread on the forum. That's where I will always publish them. So that's how the process works. From an idea to getting something out of the door, if it's very simple, I can do it in a day, 2 days. Generally, it takes me 2 weeks. I start on one weekend and 2 weeks later is when I issue a release. And I don't tend to do much else in those 2 weeks. It's quite full time. So that's why the software releases come fairly slowly. Recently then, what have I done? About 2 months ago, maybe 6 weeks, I simplified the video and sound switching. We used to have this problem where if you had the easy cap plugged in, you couldn't do MPEG-2 from the camera. And I did a lot of logic around making that problem go away. However, it's made things a lot more complicated in that I have to check what devices are connected and work out whether they're a microphone, an easy cap or something else. And that way, if you come along with a new microphone, we have one today, the software won't recognize it. It has to be in the list effectively. So, but if you do get a new device that doesn't work, send me details about it and we'll work out how to get it in the software. One of the big things that I was really pleased, we got video input working for MPEG-2. So you can have an old composite video camera and you can feed that into the Portsdown and transmit that in MPEG-2 with sound. So that gives us a sound with vision capability. I'll come back to sound with H.264 later. One thing I have just put in the last month or so is still video capture. And I can demonstrate this actually. Excuse me, standing in front of the screen for a moment. Not that one, that one. So here we are. You'll all be familiar with that screen. If you go to menu 2 and then go to menu 3, which is this bottom button down at bottom right, you'll see these 3 buttons here, snap, view and check. I haven't got a video source in the input to this at the moment, but essentially when you press snap, it looks what's on the video and takes a JPEG of it, takes a photo of it. And when you press check, it will show you what the photos were. Now these photos on here are from a 5.6 gigs transmission from Noel. Not very instructive until you get to that one. And there it is, the Land Rover as usual. So this was a 5.6 gigs analog transmission being captured by Portsdown so that we could take a photo of it for posterity. It's just a feature that I wanted to put in there and was fairly easy to do. The view feature there gives a 1 Hz refresh of whatever is coming in the video port. So have a play with those. There's a page on the wiki about how to access the files afterwards, so you can take them off and send them to your friends if you're really sad like I am. So that's that feature. The next one I'll do while we're here is the information screen. Bottom middle of menu 3 here is info. Work. And I put this together because quite often you get a Portsdown and you can't understand what all the settings are on it. So it tells you what the software version is, what the IP address is. So if you've booted up your Portsdown but you want to talk to it and you can't remember what IP address it was on boot, you can look here. It tells you the CPU temperatures and GPU temperatures. The next line is upcoming, it's not in the current version, but if you've had a supply voltage problem, it will tell you that you've had a supply voltage problem. You know the little yellow flash that you get in top right of the screen? If that has happened since boot, it will tell you that. So you can see a lot of problems these days are caused by low supply voltage. Tells you what all the settings are, what the serial number of the SD card is. If you manage loads of SD cards, that's really useful. And it tells you what audio devices are connected. So that's a screen to look at if you can't quite work out what's going wrong. Just going back to computer. There we go. Thank you. Okay. So those are some of the things I've done recently. Let's have a look at my to-do list. I think highest on most people's priorities is to get H.264 working with sound. So let's get MP4 video out there with sound. Talking to Evereast about this, he's promised to work on it this month. He has a prototype working that's not as stable as I would like, which generates AAC sound. Now that's great, all satellite receivers can receive AAC sound except the current version of Minitune. So more of that later. PIDs has caused a bit of a problem with repeaters. If you go into some repeaters with the wrong PID, it's not happy. I have made all the PIDs in MPEG-2 configurable, but it needs Evereast to make some code changes to get them working in H.264. A major change that may confuse some of you when it comes, but I think is worth doing. At the moment, the input modes are labelled with the output mode. So we've got CAM MPEG-2 and CAM H.264 for the input modes. Wouldn't it be easier if we could just select camera on one button and H.264 on another button, and then we can select test card on one button and it still goes at H.264 or whatever. So this change will come soon, where we have a toggle switch on the right hand side there that says I'm either MPEG-2 or H.264. It might even be a three-way toggle and go through carrier as well. Haven't quite decided on that yet. So you get to pick the source and you get to pick the transmission mode, which I think is a bit more logical. Output to Pluto SDR. Charles tells me this is going to be easy. We'll give it a try, but it would be nice if we could use the Pluto SDR as a modulator. Charles will talk a bit more about the Pluto tomorrow. Some of you might have seen them. £100 software-defined radio. will output up to 6 gigs. So we hope to have a go at that. Right, currently we can take input from the Pi camera, or we can take input from video or images. What we can't do is take HDMI input. There's a device appeared on eBay, this one's I still haven't unwrapped this one yet, which is HDMI in, network out. They're about 25 quid, something like 25, 30 quid, which for HDMI capture is really cheap. Hopefully we'll be able to get input out of an HDMI camera into Portsdown. Which leads us on to, well, can we do HD? It would be nice. Now this is going to be DVB-S HD, but I don't see any reason why we can't, unless somebody in the room can tell me why we can't. You know, let's try doing HDMI through DVB-S out. My colleagues in the US are using it. They are really suffering because their receivers don't like pictures that aren't at 25 frames per second, or they don't like 576 pixels high. They're cheap receivers. So their receivers are non-standard, because if they fitted the standard, they wouldn't mind. However, we'll try and configure that US standard in, and actually it's the same numbers I'm playing with as I'm playing for HD. I'm just pushing them the other way. MPEG-2 test card. There's no test card there yet for MPEG-2. I'd like to put a test card facility in for that. And lastly, configuring the caption position. You'll have seen the caption in MPEG-2 mode is at top left in the latest release. I moved it from top right because people said it interfered with repeaters, which have their captions top right. Well, in the US, repeaters have their caption on the top left, so they want it bottom left. Yeah, I can't win. So we'll make it configurable. Those are features, things that you'll know about. There are some things I need to do on the system side of the house. Repeater streaming currently, if you've got a noisy signal in for repeater streaming, occasionally the Pi will lock up. I want to put something in there to boot it back into life if the repeater stream dies, a heartbeat. I'd like to add HTOP, which is a function for measuring how busy the CPUs are, into the core build. That's trivial, but I'll do it. There is something wrong with the transmit switching in carrier mode. You might have noticed it doesn't come out of transmit when you try to from carrier mode. It's low down the priority list, but I'd like to sort it. Composite video preview, I mentioned earlier, it only updates at about 1 Hertz. I'd like to get that up to about 5 Hertz if I can, so I'm going to have a look at that. And the biggie. Some of you may have heard that the operating system for the Raspberry Pi has just been upgraded from something that was called Jessie to something called Stretch. Those names come from Toy Story. Jessie is the lady on the right. Stretch is the octopus. Don't ask me why, but there we go. In Windows terms, it's a bit like going from Windows 7 to Windows 10. They're both good, but in future, only Windows 10 is going to be supported. So we're going to have to make that change. It's a major upgrade for us because some of the core applications don't work in Stretch at the moment. So we're going to have to make some changes. And because it's an operating system upgrade, it's not really wise in Linux to do an upgrade. We're going to have to do a new build. So it's not going to be a case of going into the console menu and doing an upgrade. It's going to be a case of rebuilding the card. I don't think that's as scary as it sounds now that most of you have used the terminal. And I'll take the opportunity to tidy some of the configuration files because they've grown a bit like Topsy. and I'd really like to make them a bit more correct and easier to use. So there are some system things that I need to do behind the scenes. But this is what really excites me. I'd like to make the thing more of a DATV toolbox. I saw on the RTL blog day before yesterday, somebody was saying, well, they'd made an amateur radio Go box, which essentially was a Pele case with a handy like that in a Raspberry Pi with a spectrum analyzer and so on it for amateur radio. Well, I see the Portsdown really becoming our DATV Go box. So it's, it'll transmit, it'll receive or signal monitor, it'll do spectrum analysis and so on like that. So one of the things I'd like to do is make it into a signal generator. We've got a spare output on the ADF 4351 board. I've routed it to the back panel on here. There's no reason why you shouldn't do the same. We can tell that to go to any frequency between 50 and 4,400 megs. Wouldn't that be useful to have in the shack? Without buying any extra hardware, we can do that. It's sine wave above 2.2 gigs, it's square wave below. Or you could use the DATV Express, which we already support. And the advantage of the DATV Express is you can move the level up and down by about 40 dB, which is really useful. Could we use, both of those have lower limits at about 50 megs-ish. Could we use RPI-TX, which is another one of Every's programs, to cover lower? We could certainly do an audio SIG-gen using the audio output off the Raspberry Pi. Or could we use the Pluto to go up to 6 gigs? Or could we use the ADF 5355, which is that board pictured there, which will output up to 13 gigs. They're 65 quid on eBay. So, thinking along the ideas of that. We've got a screen. Many of us have built an RTL SDR into our Portsdown. Why can't you do spectrum monitor? It's just a matter of integrating the software. So looking at something like this, which is called Freak Show, I did try to get it running for today, but I failed. It's a bit more complex than just adding the software because it needs the graphical environment there. But this looks really nice as a basic spectrum monitor. Okay, we've got an RTL FM receiver in RTL SDR in there. There's already an application called RTL FM, and if I just go back to hang on, there we go. That one there. You'll have noticed 3 extra buttons that I've just bodged in this week. Those 3 there. If I select 144.75 FM and turn the volume up, no, it's not going to do it for me, would you believe? The idea is that you can straight away listen to 144.75, and that's why my Portsdown has speakers in it, so it'll act as a receiver as well. So, and to make the presets on that configurable, is the idea. There is also already built in there a DATV signal monitor. Let me show you that.
Dave, there's special bonus points in the construction competition for ones with speakers in them.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, yeah. I win then. So. Okay, so if you select receiver there, Ah, that's nice. Doesn't clear the screen down at the moment. Constellation display at the top left, signal, MER signal strength, and there's a spectrum analyzer comes up there as well. That will receive 333 kilosymbols but it needs a reasonable MER to get some receive going. Looking at improving that with a separate menu for what parameters it uses, so we don't have to use the same parameters as transmit. Think it needs a few stability improvements in there. It will only do H.264 unless you pay, I think it's £2.40 for an MPEG-2 license from the Raspberry Pi Foundation. But looking at whether we can improve that and whether we can get audio out of it. At the moment, the transport stream comes out of it and it only goes for video, but there's a possibility we can get audio in the future. Audio spectrum display. I'm sure we can do it. It's just a matter of finding the software. Okay, so that's the sort of new ideas I've come up with. How about ideas from the floor? Has anybody got things they would like it to do and think it might be able to do? Chris? Right, can you explain it to everybody else, please?
There's a lot of software around. Can we have the microphone?
Oh, sorry. My fault.
There's a lot of software around that will send a stream in RTMP format. That's the format that we currently send our streams to the BATC streaming server in, including Portsdown, of course. But vMix, Open Broadcaster, various other things, Twitch, all these bits of software will all support RTMP. But what they won't do is generate a broadcast stream, a transport stream. So if Portsdown could accept an RTMP stream in and then forward it on in transport stream format across the air, that would be absolutely ideal, because you could then just turn your stream on and off on vMix and the Portsdown transmitter would go on and off. So when you want to transmit, you just turn the stream on, and when you want to stop transmitting, you turn it off. Simple as that. And the beauty of it, you don't then need to run, I hate to say it, FFmpeg on your PC to get the stream. In a nutshell.
That's on my list then. When you come up with the basic software. Yeah, I need help. I can't do it all myself. Any others from the floor? Nigel.
Hello, Nigel 280EHH. Being fairly new to the hobby and to BATC, excuse my lack of knowledge, but the problem I have, and I'm sure we've got more people in the floor that have problems in the visual side of Portsdown, is there any chance of getting the text? I know you're governed by the size of the monitor. Any chance of getting the text slightly a little bit bigger?
I'm constrained by the button size. Yeah. I will look at it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any others? No.
Did you just want to comment on the use of other screens?
Yeah, other screens. While I will try and support other screens, I only have the WaveShare to test with. So I will guarantee it works with the WaveShare. If other people can tell me how to configure the software for another screen, I will try and support it. But there are some issues around screens. So,
Did you just want to emphasise about we can now do streaming? Something people probably don't realise.
right. One of the things we've put in recently is the ability to stream from the video input, or the PiCam if you really want to, directly to the BATC streamer, and to hardware switch that stream so that you can have a lock light on a receiver or a signal detected light on an FM ATV receiver, and turn the stream on. That will go instantly without user intervention to BATC stream, or you can run it 24/7. And the idea is that for repeater custodians, it means they're not running a PC to stream with its 100, 150 watts of power consumption. They're only going to run a Raspberry Pi. with a few watts.
And that can be a Raspberry Pi without the touch screen.
You don't need the touch screen. All you need is a Raspberry Pi and an easy cap. Nothing else. And a decent internet connection. One other thing I need to mention, there is a Portsdown Facebook group, which I only found out about today. Yeah. So, who was it who mentioned it to me? Could you, Portsdown...
Portsdown Builders, 18 UK.
If you search for Portsdown Builders on Facebook, you will find the Facebook group. So, brand new.
Sorry, I have two from the screen. One says more symbol rates, please. And the second comment says audio input via Bluetooth.
Ooh, okay. Let's do the easy one
Can you
first.
repeat the question? There you are.
Right, the question was more symbol rates, please. You can program the symbol rates that the screen uses from the console menu. So if you want a symbol rate of 4167, which I know is used in Australia, you can program that in. You go into the console, you go into menu, setup menu 2, and you can change the button to say 4167 and the stream to say 4167. Upper limit on symbol rate is about 6 megasymbols. It starts to fall over at 6. Can't go much higher than that. It's very comfortable at 4 there. And the second question was Bluetooth. Haven't played with Bluetooth, don't have a Bluetooth mic to test with. Please test it and tell me if it works. If I need to make any changes, I'll put the changes in the software, but I can't do everything. Okay.
Oh, sorry, there was a rephrase from that. More symbol rate buttons.
What buttons do I take off the screen is the question. Yeah, that's where I am. You know, we've got this much screen space. I need bigger writing over here, but I need more buttons over here. Yeah, that's where I am. One thing I'd like to do while I've got a few minutes left is talk about Minituner. Hang on, I need to go up one there. We're running at the moment on Minitune version 0.6D. Unfortunately, Jean-Pierre isn't able to be with us today, but he did send us an email update on Minitune v0.7. We're not sure when this is going to appear on the streets, but it's got more video and audio codecs in it, and it will decode AAC, which Evereast is working on to go with H.264 out of the Portsdown. So that's one of the reasons I've been holding back on releasing anything with audio with H.264, is we needed Minitune to support it as well. And it looks like that is coming together. He mentions a bandwidth bug, or an auto bandwidth bug that I wasn't even aware existed. Low SR down to 75 kilosymbols a second. That's now 125 down to 75 kilosymbols a second gives us another 2 dB, perhaps another 1 dB in path length, worth thinking about. Set or change the gain. More FEC settings for DVB-S2. There is one of the FEC settings that was missing, I know. Use the EEPROM in the USB module for saving the setup. That's interesting. And choose which kind of screen is used in the minitune.ini file. So that was the update we had. You can drive hardware lock lights off of the Minituner V2. And in due course use an OLED or LED display, LCD display. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but more details to follow. Watch this space. We hope to have a CQTV article on what's going on with Minituner. But
Buttons sounds interesting.
it does, yeah. I'm sure you'll all agree that Minituner is great for what it is, and we wouldn't be where we are without it. Really need to keep pushing on that.
Is Jean-Pierre on the stream, Frank?
Not at the moment, I don't think.
Okay, and I will finish off by just asking, please tell me what you want, but help me to write it. You know, if you want a new button, tell me where it should go. It's as trivial as that. It's another decision I don't have to make. I don't have to spend the time on it.